Ben Shapiro is famous for taking on The View's most controversial takes, but even he was stunned by Whoopi Goldberg's latest comments. From her outrageous remarks about the Holocaust to comparisons involving Israel, Ben didn't hold back. How did Whoopi manage to turn one of history's darkest events into a shocking display of ignorance? And why do these views go unchecked on live TV? Stay tuned, this is a showdown you won't want to miss. Ben Shapiro has built a reputation for fearlessly confronting controversial figures and platforms, and one of his regular targets is the talk show The View. He sees the show as a breeding ground for superficial discussions and ideologically skewed takes, often driven by mainstream media narratives rather than facts. Shapiro has been openly critical of the hosts, suggesting that their opinions on current events lack depth and insight, frequently relying on emotional appeals over evidence-based arguments. Interestingly, Ben has long expressed a desire to appear on The View as a guest. He's often described this ambition as his version of stepping into the lion's den, where he could directly challenge the viewpoints of its outspoken panelists. But even with this long-standing wish, he likely didn't anticipate the kind of statements that would come from one of the show's most prominent figures, Whoopi Goldberg. One of the most striking incidents that drew Shapiro's ire was Whoopi's controversial comments about the Holocaust. As a Jewish man, Shapiro found her remarks not just offensive, but deeply troubling. In a widely condemned statement, Whoopi argued that the Holocaust was not about race, but about man's inhumanity to man. Shapiro quickly addressed the absurdity of her claim, emphasizing that the Holocaust was fundamentally racial, targeting Jews based on their ethnicity. Shapiro highlighted the irony of Whoopi's perspective, noting that she frequently frames issues through the lens of race.
Comes courtesy of our friends over at The View. When I say our friends over at The View, I mean the low IQ idiots who are on panel at The View. And yes, you are a complete stupid idiot. My God, she is so stupid. This is the same lady who thinks everything is racist. Everything and everyone is racist, except Hitler and the Holocaust. Genius, long ambition to actually be a guest on The View. They'll never have me on, of course, because it would go horribly for them. But
Holocaust isn't about race. No. It's not about race.
No, it's about a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
not only is that the worst clip in the history of The View, that is the worst clip in the history of television. Goldberg is obnoxious and stupid beyond all measure. The Holocaust was not about race. Ask the Nazis. The entire Holocaust was about race. All of it. Which is why they didn't just pick on Jews who observed Judaism. They picked on anyone who had quote-unquote Jewish blood. The entire thing was about race and inhumanity to man. Nope. It is about a genocidal attempt to exterminate the Jews, which has a thousands-of-year-old history.
Yet, when it came to one of history's most racially charged atrocities, she seemed to disregard its clear racial motivations. For Shapiro, this wasn't just a matter of personal offense. It was a glaring example of historical distortion that trivialized the suffering of millions. Shapiro doesn't just criticize Whoopi as an individual, but uses her remarks as evidence of the broader intellectual failings he sees on The View. This incident highlights his belief that the show prioritizes sensationalism over informed debate, leaving serious issues misunderstood or misrepresented. Shapiro's frustration stems from the fact that the Holocaust isn't just another chapter in history, it's a pivotal event that shaped the modern world. To downplay its significance by framing it as man's inhumanity to man, as Whoopi did, is not just a misunderstanding, but a serious distortion of historical truth. With Shapiro, such remarks trivialize the targeted and racially motivated extermination of 6 million Jews, a fact that should be beyond debate. What concerns Shapiro most isn't just the content of Whoopi's comments, but the platform that allowed them to go unchallenged. For millions of viewers, such statements risk normalizing ignorance about events that demand understanding and reverence. And the criticism doesn't stop with Whoopi's misstep. He sees The View as a breeding ground for ill-informed and inflammatory rhetoric, often without accountability. This sentiment was further validated for Shapiro when Whoopi made an even more shocking claim, likening the US and Israel to terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Taliban. For Ben, such a comparison not only showcased a profound lack of geopolitical understanding, but also highlighted the dangers of unchecked narratives on a mainstream platform. To him, such statements don't just provoke outrage, they undermine the credibility of important discussions on global conflicts. The most alarming aspect, according to Ben Shapiro, is how rarely Whoopi Goldberg or others on The View are genuinely challenged by their co-hosts. When disagreements do arise, they tend to focus more on diffusing tension than addressing the actual absurdity of the remarks being made. For Shapiro, this passive dynamic reinforces a culture of intellectual complacency on the show, where controversial statements are met with either quiet agreement or polite avoidance, rather than serious debate. Shapiro's frustration with The View goes beyond simple amusement, it borders on disbelief. He argues that the program thrives on low-effort, polarizing commentary that encourages groupthink among its hosts and audience. On this show, he points out, failing to conform to the prevailing insanity puts you at risk of being labeled an outsider for merely showing intellectual independence. For him, this dynamic highlights a disturbing trend, how such platforms can perpetuate divisive narratives under the guise of promoting informed discussion. What Shapiro finds particularly troubling is that The View has managed to sustain this approach for years, consistently making provocative and poorly researched statements that deepen political and cultural divides. He often likens the show to a circus where the hosts parade their self-proclaimed commitment to equality while simultaneously engaging in inflammatory rhetoric that does little to bridge societal gaps. And while Whoopi often takes the spotlight for her controversial remarks, she's far from alone. Shapiro frequently highlights Joy Behar as another key contributor to The View's missteps. Joy's comments, he notes, often lack proper research and critical thought, aligning more with a liberal narrative than actual facts. Shapiro particularly critiques her well-intentioned yet clumsy attempts to advocate for racial equality. While Joy may aim to defend marginalized groups, her statements often reinforce damaging stereotypes instead, undercutting the very causes she claims to champion. Ben Shapiro doesn't hesitate to expose the flaws in Joy Behar's attempts to position herself as the ultimate advocate. While her intentions might seem noble on the surface, her delivery often backfires spectacularly. Instead of promoting equality, her poorly thought-out remarks frequently perpetuate stereotypes and misconceptions. Shapiro highlights the irony of someone claiming to fight for justice while simultaneously causing harm through ignorance. To him, this makes Joy one of the most concerning figures on The View. The backlash Joy faces online further underscores the public's growing frustration with her misguided commentary. Audiences are increasingly calling out her contradictions, and Shapiro believes this lack of accountability is precisely why she continues to double down on her narrative. If she doesn't address these flaws, Shapiro muses, Joy might very well surpass Whoopi Goldberg as the reigning queen of absurd statements on The View. Then there's one of Whoopi's most infamous moments, her tirade against men having a voice in debates about fetal rights. Shapiro's response to this was equal parts sharp and insightful. He pointed out how Whoopi's argument was riddled with contradictions, particularly given the progressive values she and her co-hosts champion. If liberal ideologies are supposed to be inclusive and intersectional, why would someone like Whoopi make such exclusionary and potentially offensive remarks? Shapiro finds it particularly baffling that Whoopi seemed unaware of the possible transphobic undertones in her statements as well as the implied ageism directed at older men. This glaring inconsistency reveals a double standard that the left often imposes on others but fails to apply to themselves. For Shapiro, it's yet another example of The View's tendency to overlook logic and consistency in favor of emotional, headline-grabbing rhetoric. Ben Shapiro's perspective on Whoopi Goldberg's constant missteps is a combination of humor and sharp critique. He can't help but question why, after decades of public exposure, Whoopi still manages to make such fundamental mistakes. For someone in their 60s with years of experience in front of a camera, it's almost perplexing that she still gets so many facts wrong. How can someone who's supposed to represent wisdom continue to spew uninformed opinions on a daily basis? Ben finds it both amusing and troubling at the same time. The truth is, The View has become a goldmine of ridiculous commentary, and Ben doesn't shy away from calling it out. From Whoopi to Joy, each host seems to bring a new level of absurdity to the table. And if Ben ever had the chance to step onto that set, he's confident it would be nothing short of a disaster for the liberal hosts. With his facts, logic, and rapid-fire responses, they wouldn't stand a chance. It's clear that many of Ben's viewers are eager for that moment to come, and it's something that would no doubt make for compelling television. Before we wrap up, we want to hear from you. Which moment from The View left you shaking your head? Was it one of Whoopi's absurd comments or something from Joy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.